Okay, you could ask a different question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Sands, you mentioned you reviewed a number of articles, is that right? And did you provide those articles to counsel in this case?
Interestingly, the article.
Hold on. Did you send them to the attorney so that we could use those articles in the case?
Yeah, so I was just going to differentiate. The one article that I referenced.
Let me ask you a different question, Dr. Sands.
No, that's.
Did you review an article about the association of liver fibrosis with cognitive test performance?
Yes.
Okay. Did you also review an article titled Neurodevelopmental Outcomes in Children with Liver Diseases?
Yes.
Did you review an article titled Neuropsychological Functioning and Health-Related Quality of Life?
Yes.
And did you also review an article by an author named Srivastava, Serial Evaluation of Children with Acute Liver Failure?
Yes.
And did you rely on those articles in reaching your opinions in this case? Your Honor, with that testimony, I'd move to admit exhibits 431, 425, 426, and 433.
I didn't get the last one, sorry.
430. 430 is the last one.
40.
430.
Thank you. We're good.
No objection, so 425, 426, 430, and 431
Yes, Your Honor.
are all in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to show you a few of those articles, Dr. Sands. Shane, can we now have exhibit 431? Doctor, can you see the article that's on the screen here?
Yes.
This is the liver fibrosis article, is that right?
Yes.
And directing your attention to the purple box there in the methods section, do you see that?
Yes.
This was an examination of the association of liver fibrosis with cognition and brain imaging parameters.
Yes.
And if you go down a little ways, you'll see results, and it mentions the number of participants there, over 105,000.
Yes.
Is that significant to you?
That's a massive number of patients. Normally, depending upon the diagnosis and the incidence, you could have anywhere from 50 to 300. To have 105 participants is very, very solid, really very reliable. And then also 41,000 underwent MRI.
Okay. And moving down, it says that in adjusted models, liver fibrosis, was associated with worse performance on the DSST tests of executive function, but not memory, and that liver fibrosis was also associated with lower hippocampal and total brain volumes.
Yes.
What's the significance of that to a neuropsychologist like yourself?
So the DSST is a test that looks at attention. So because if you can't pay 100% attention, you're not going to remember 100% of what someone says. So it's your attention, your working memory, which is your ability to hold information in your head for a minute or two and do something with it, short-term memory, and then processing speed, how quickly you can get a task done. So those three are critically important to life as well as students. And they looked at those who had fibrosis and those who did not. They tested them once, and then 5.8 years later, they tested them again, and this is this paper. So 5.8 years later, roughly 6 years later, they're significantly different. Those who had have liver fibrosis scored significantly worse than those who never had liver fibrosis, accounting for 6 years later. So also the notion that, oh, it goes away and kids are fine, or adults in this case are fine, is not, it is proven that that's not true, that these adults are significantly worse on that test. And then they also gave them another test of executive functioning, that executive functioning is problem solving, to be goal directed and be able to multitask, juggle a few things, set priorities, get things done in a timely fashion, again, important in life. It was significantly different between those who had liver fibrosis and those who didn't. And then the MRI, lastly, the hippocampus is the part of our brain that stores longer term memory, like studying for a test or remembering things. So it's interesting that their memory testing didn't come out as something different, but the region that controls that was smaller, and then their total brain volume being smaller is also worse in terms of cognitive functioning. So pretty remarkable. It's almost 6 years later, and they're doing significantly worse on really important cognitive functioning tests. as compared to those who didn't have liver fibrosis. And the numbers, again, are massive, and you're going to see in a minute these other studies we looked at have fewer patients. And I just want to also say to you that these are adults, and we're talking today about children, but my mind is that if adults whose brains are fairly developed and pretty mostly developed are significantly worse on those key factors, can you imagine what a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old who went through and has similar fibrosis, they're going to be in the same boat, if not worse. So the fact that it's adult doesn't, in my mind, discount it. It makes it even more serious for the children.
Go to the second page of this article, please, Shane. Right up at the top left portion there. It said, even when clinical liver fibrosis is not silent, it's been associated with cardiovascular and cerebrovascular disease. We previously demonstrated an association between liver fibrosis and worse cognitive performance in a population-based study. Dr. Sands, what's the significance of that to you?
That in the general population, once again, there's a significant difference in those who have liver fibrosis and those who didn't, comparing them by same age and generally education level, to say that the group that had liver fibrosis is performing worse, significantly worse. So it's reinforcing the last what we read in the last article. So it's another red flag, again, as we're talking about, the second one.
Shane, would you bring up Exhibit 425 now, please? Dr. Sands, this is the article, Neurodevelopmental Outcomes in Children with Liver Diseases. And I'd like to direct your attention on the left side there where it says results. It says 25 studies were included of 1,913 children, 19 of which described children after liver transplantation, which that's not relevant here. But in terms of sample size, is this significant to you?
Yes.
Why?
So this is different. This is not a research study. This is a meta-analysis. They're looking at all available studies. They're looking at 25 different studies that were carried out and then saying, what can we glean from all of them? So to me, that's also powerful because you're looking at 25 different research studies and coming up with one finding. And then yes, I did exclude those who had liver transplantation because those children would do even worse, and we don't want to cloud the issue here. We're talking about kids who had acute liver failure who have not yet or have not had liver transplants.
Now, Shane, would you mind scrolling to the right in that box there? What is known, Doctor, second bullet point, children with liver disease are at an increased risk for impaired neurodevelopment before and after liver transplantation. You see that?
Yes.
And then what's new, that first bullet point there, children with liver diseases are at increased risk of deficits in all neurodevelopmental domains, cognitive, behavioral, and motor outcomes. Was that important to you?
Yes, absolutely.
Why?
You may have it later in your question, but so essentially, as I said, you have parsed out those who had liver transplant. So that left 6 articles that were kids just like these who had acute liver failure who did not. It says native liver, so they did not have transplant. 4 out of the 6 studies, so that's 67%, 4 out of the 6 studies said that these kids who still have their liver but had acute liver failure did worse on tests of cognition, behavior also, it's not just cognition, and motor difficulties. In fact, 82% of these kids that I looked at that were similar to these children, 82%, that's 4 out of every 5 kids, had motor development, significant motor development deficits. And we already talked about how important it is to be able to run around the soccer field or take notes or type. So that's staggering for 4 out of the 6 studies.
Last question on this article. Mr. Godfrey, if you scroll down the bottom of that first paragraph right there, you see where it reads, accordingly, severe disease, hospitalization, and surgery during early childhood are also thought to interfere with the healthy development of children's central nervous systems. Do you see that, Doctor?
Yes.
Is that consistent with what you've seen in your clinical practice?
Absolutely. I'm sure you're only scratching the surface. Hopefully you haven't come across people who've gone through these experiences, but as my career, everything from your life turning on a dime, figuring out your child has been diagnosed and all of a sudden your world turns upside down in a moment, having to, if you're fortunate enough to have a spouse, how are you in two places, with your one child and the other child, and work, and insurance, and then dealing with doctors and people coming in and out of the room at all times of the day and night. All those procedures that we were talking about is 100% very, very stressful, overwhelming to most, if not all, parents and children. And yeah, absolutely, and surgeries is a risk factor as well for permanent effects. So it does interfere with healthy development because kids aren't hardwired, born to spend, weeks at a time in a hospital or months at a time, or be treated for 2-3 years, not be in school. So yeah, it absolutely can impact healthy CNS, which is brain and spine development.
Let's go to the next article, please. Exhibit 426, Jim. Dr. Sands, this is neuropsychological functioning and health-related quality of life. This is one of the articles you reviewed.
Yes.
Right there at objective, right there at the top, it states that pediatric acute liver failure is a rare but serious event with poorly understood functional outcomes. You see that?
Yes.
Is that consistent with your review of the medical records in this case?
Yes, almost every article I reviewed says that we don't know enough, and we need to have more studies that go further out in time so we can better understand the trajectory, like I was showing you before, so that we can support, and the articles say, the child and the parents, both. And every single one says that there's a lack of information. We need more studies to better understand who's at risk and how to help the children and parents.
Can we go to the very bottom right of this page, please, Jay? Last complete sentence on the page. This study suggests the potential for prolonged and perhaps incomplete recovery of cognitive functioning following pediatric acute liver failure. Doctor, was this portion of the study significant to you?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's talking about, trying to guess and estimate who's going to recover, how long it's going to take, and will they completely recover? And they don't have a clear answer. So it's really our mission, our call to err on the side of being responsible, conservative, and make sure we take care of these kids.
Okay. Last article we'll talk about, Exhibit 430, please, Shane. This article is serial evaluation of children with acute liver failure with advanced MRI. Did you see that, Doctor?
Yes.
Did you review this article?
Yes.
We'll first go to the methods section there at the top left. Now, it says the number of subjects in this study, does it?
Yes.
What does it say?
A total of 11 acute liver failure children and 8 healthy controls were evaluated with MRI, blood, pro-inflammatory cytokines, thiamine levels, liver function, and neurocognitive testing. And then they reevaluated approximately 43.5 plus or minus 26 days, so that could put you to 26 days, which would be 1 month to like maybe 3 months for the first follow-up. And you see, you have to be mindful, remember we're talking about numbers in the study. So you start off with 11, and now first follow-up is 8, and then 157 days later, second follow-up goes down to 6. So you go from 11 to 8 to 6. So compare 6 to 11 is almost, you're missing almost half the people that you originally looked at, and 11 is paltry to begin with. And why that's also important is a lot of my research is doing testing repeatedly over time to see who does better, who stays the same, who does worse. And because we're trying to come up with new protocols, new treatments that will be curative but won't impact their functioning. And so missed data, missed time points is the bane of my existence. We work really, really hard to have like 90% plus. Like we don't lose people, because if you lose people, how are you going to say where they started, where they finished up? And it makes you wonder, hey, now you got 6 people and you had 11. Did the 5 kids who no longer came in, did they not come in because they're doing well? Did they not come in because they're not doing well? You can't come up with a conclusion if you tested 11 people and only have 6 later on. That's A, small to begin with, and B, you're missing almost half your population.
Go to the second page of the article, please. And the section neurocognitive testing there in the middle of the right side. It says here that this study used a revised Amsterdamse Kinder Intelligence Test. Have you ever heard of that test?
I haven't, I would imagine that it's, so the Wechsler, WISC, and the WACE are buzzwords for standard IQ tests that are used around the world. They're translated and normed, so now you can't just change the words, you actually have to give it to, thousands of people and say, okay, the score of 6 actually correlates with the 50th percentile, like we were saying. So the Wechsler tests are standard. So perhaps, I don't live in Amsterdam, but I've never heard of it, and it's not a prominent major IQ test.
And let's go now to the 4th page of the article, please. And neuropsychological tests, please. So this portion, Dr. Sands sets forth the conclusions that this study reaches. Can you just tell us generally what the conclusion of this study was?
Sure, and I just want to add one thing that I didn't mention. Is not only do they start out with 11 and end up with 6, but which is small and smaller, and use a measure that we don't know much about, but that it was translated for use with Indian children. So I was making reference to the Wechsler, the WIS test, that when you translate something, it's a huge undertaking to renorm it and make sure that actually you can't just change words and be like, that's the same test. So that's just another ding on this test that they're trying to say that these kids are doing better.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you asked me a question about this?
Yeah, so this is the conclusion of the neuropsychological aspect of this study. And is it generally the result of this study that the children with acute liver failure at the second follow-up test, their scores were similar to those of the controls?
I'm just reading this. Performance was on par with controls. Second follow-up, the score showed improvement in all the administered tests as compared to the first follow-up. That is what it says, yes.
Okay. So we've looked at a few tests, right? We've looked at a couple with hundreds of thousands of subjects. Say, concerning, there's this test here with 6 children in India who say maybe they do okay. How does that balance out for you?
Right, it's night and day. I don't mean to bash someone's research, it's not my job. But hopefully explain to you what you'd be looking at as a consumer of research. How many patients, how many people do they follow up on, what outcome measures do they use? Those are the questions you'd want to ask. And then you would actually show me something from Sorensen earlier that said about the prolonged trajectory and unclear if it's incomplete. She was actually talking about this article, which I took to mean that Sorensen, who's had published most articles on this population, was questioning these findings in that study and saying that it's even though it looks rosy, that it's unclear the trajectory and if it's complete or incomplete. So it's not just me, other people are questioning these results for the reasons we just discussed.
Can we just switch back to the PowerPoint, please? And so Doctor, before I talk to you about your conclusions, I want to clarify a couple of things. Did you interview any of the children in this case?
No.
Did you ever do a sit-down assessment with them?
No.
Did you ever have them send you any type of self-report?
No.
Did you ever get a report from any of their teachers or educators?
No, I did not.
Aren't those important pieces of information that you should have before you opine about future care?
And they can be, it depends on the situation. So neuropsychology, I'll try to be brief, I promise, but could be literally a half-hour bedside eval. It could be a 2-hour testing battery. Let's just prioritize what's important. It could be 8 hours of testing. So after having done this for 25 years, you're looking at the presenting problem, you're looking at the literature, you're looking at the medical records, and I'm thinking, okay, let's figure out what the next steps should be. And I felt absolutely comfortable and confident reviewing the records, looking at the literature we just talked about, that identified a significant risk factor. Talking to the parents for a full hour about how things are going in their home. And then using a standardized questionnaire that they answered in a valid way to then inform my professional opinion that it's more likely than not that these kids are at risk, given their young age, and given the studies and what they went through, that they're at high risk for developing problems in the future when they do go to school. Again, elementary, middle, high school, And they were incredibly young, 7 months up to, 2 years and then 5 years. So we just don't know enough. So I am recommending, which we'll talk about in a minute, that we follow them up and get them what they need thoroughly and consistently. And I learned what I needed to learn from the literature, the medical records, speaking to the parents and looking at their questionnaires.
Dr. Sands, if you had sat down with any of these children, and let's say you sit down, you interview them, and your takeaway is they're normal right now, would that change your opinions?
Excellent question. No, I wouldn't. It would not.
Why not?
Yeah, thanks. Because they're generally not in school, and they're really young. And parents trying to be optimistic and, oh, my child's doing okay is great, and I think that's a fantastic approach. But a couple of things is many of these parents don't have the ability to compare their child to what's normal development, for other kids their age, and they're thrilled, as they should be, and so ecstatic that their children are alive and healthy and did not get liver transplants. So that's where their head's at, They're living ahead now and excited. And it's our job, medical professionals and neuropsychologists, to figure out what these kids will need moving forward. So even if they had if I went and tested them or spoke with them, and they were normal, which is not the case that I showed you. But even if they were, I wouldn't change my opinion. Never in a million years would I say, they're fine, they don't need follow-up, have a good life. That would be incredibly irresponsible and unethical.
Let's talk about the parents for a brief second. Did you do any examination, assessment, or interview of the parents about themselves?
Right. The focus for me was on the children, but in speaking with each parent, I got striking image that you heard as well, how fresh in their mind it is. And then, to me, there's a couple of touch points. I was hearing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm not classifying them or diagnosing them, but I'm hearing symptoms, post-traumatic stress symptoms, like anxiety. Hypervigilance is when these parents are saying, oh, if my child hurts themselves, has a stomachache, I get freaked out and I need to go to the doctor. Those are check marks of post-traumatic stress disorder. Do they have enough to meet the diagnosis? I'm not sure. That wasn't my main focus. But you don't need to be a psychologist to hear, dripping the anxiety and the concern. And as parents go, children follow. So it's really, really important that professionals work with them and assess if they need psychological help or psychiatric help to get stronger and move through the experience and start to, put it a little bit in the rearview mirror. Because we want to support the parents because, as I said to you, they're going to need to be there to support their children. And to the best degree, there's a lot of literature now that when you deal with parent stress, the children do better, quality of life, academics. So that you can't work with a child without supporting the parent. They're intertwined, as obviously.
Okay. Now let's talk specifically about your conclusions. This slide sets forth your conclusions for the children. What have you determined insofar as the children's future is concerned?
Right. So, a couple of things, and I've been hinting at this, but as a pediatric neuropsychologist, it's completely appropriate to test kids every 2 years. That's what I do for my research. That's what I do for clinical care, because so much will happen between first grade and third grade and fifth grade and seventh grade. So it's the evaluation, which is actually fun. They're on iPads, or there's blocks and puzzles, and it's one-on-one, and it's engaging. It's not just to do the evaluations. And again, we're looking for strengths as well as weaknesses for a lot of reasons, because everybody has peaks, everybody has valleys, it's normal. But we're looking for that because we want to identify the strengths so they can use them to help with the weaknesses. But it's not just to do the evaluations, it's to then say, do these children need any services? Do they need occupational therapy? What's their fine motor functioning like? Do they need physical therapy? Do they need speech and language? Are they having expressive or receptive language disorder? Are they behind in reading? You can't imagine how many kids have struggled. They either can read a word, or words, or not. But then if you put a text pattern in front of them, they really are unclear about what they read and be able to answer questions. Similarly for written expression, can they spell words? yes or no. And then here's an essay, write an essay about your favorite hobby and 3 reasons why you like it. So, you're looking at that. Math, do they have a math disability or not? Do they need extra time on tests because they're smart, but they just have slow processing speed and need more time to demonstrate what they know on a test? Do they need a special school placement? Do they need, again, support for academics? I don't want to gloss over, how they're thinking and feeling as well. But it's to monitor every 2 years, which is not burdensome whatsoever. You're on paper allowed to test every year. So I'm saying, let's be conservative, let's push it out every 2 years until they are 21, which theoretically would be, for most people, done with school. I wanted to be responsible. But also to say, should they need OT, PT, speech and language, reading help, math help, that we get it to them early and not wait. Like I said, you have no idea. It's the parents, oh, sorry, your child's not learning to read, they're gonna have to repeat first grade. What? So I want to get at it early and have money set aside for them to receive services. And again, I was trying to be conservative and modest for 6 years, not all the way to their 21, but 6 years is a solid amount of time to help these kids twice a week, not once a week. You can't accomplish much with once a week for these services. Twice a week is solid. Some kids are going to need 1, some will need 3, but 2 twice a week for 6 years. And that's just for one service that I just talked to you about. There are going to be some kids, I can tell you now, there are going to be some kids who are not going to need 1, they're going to need more, like OT and PT or speech and language or academics. This is only set up to give them 1 service twice a week for 6 years.
Dr. Sins, can you talk to us now about the future psychological and psychiatric evaluations you believe the children will need?
Sure. So it's not just cognitive and academic. We also want to look at their social, emotional, behavioral functioning. So psychological and then psychiatric are 2 different approaches to treat mental health. Research does show that both therapy and medication are more effective than just therapy or just medication. So that's why I put down both. Again, it's an hour interview, it's not burdensome, annually until age 21. And that should they need help, if they have ADHD, a psychologist can help them and then with how to manage their ADHD, or if they have executive functioning problems, kind of wait till the last minute to study, get disorganized, leave their books at school. They need help. The schools don't provide ADHD help and executive functioning help. You have to hire someone outside to help you with that. Similarly, if they're anxious or depressed and it impacts their social functioning, there may be a role for therapy or medication. It's not a bad word. I mean, kids don't have to struggle with anxiety and depression. So we said annually until age 21. And again, I'm trying to be modest and conservative to say that should they need help, that would be once a week, which is an appropriate time amount for therapy, for 1 to 4 years. That's dependent upon their therapist. It's not me spending real water money. It's the therapist saying, we need to keep working, we have more goals, or we're done. So 1 to 4 years, once a week, to help them with psychological and psychiatric issues that they may encounter.
Okay, let's go to the next slide and talk about the parents. What did you find that the parents require here in terms of future treatment?
Yeah, I am confident that they have post-traumatic stress symptoms, and you heard it as well. Do they need post-traumatic stress disorder? I don't know, but they need a proper psychological and psychiatric evaluation to determine that. And I know these parents are trying to be super strong, and I'm okay, it's just not my child. But it's our role in mental health to say, I know you're strong, I know you're there for your child, but we need to support you. You went through trauma, and you haven't worked on it, you haven't resolved it. Even with Mrs. Williams, she started it, doesn't mean she's done, right? But most other parents haven't had therapy. So it's the same idea, individual once a week, 1 to 4 years, based on the therapist, what the therapist thinks they need, for the reasons that we said, to support the parents, so that the parents have some peace of mind and are more present and able to parent their child in and out of the house.
Thank you, doctor. That's it for now.
Council can come up with. Thank you, council. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and take our afternoon break now. Let's come back at 3:10, so about 20 minutes or so. During this recess, you're advised not to talk or converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else under the assembly connected with this crowd. Do not read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial or any person connected with this trial by any medium of information, including without limitation to social media, text, newspapers, television, internet, and radio. Do not visit the scene of any events mentioned during the trial. Do not undertake any investigation. Do not do any posted communications on any social networking sites. Do not do any independent research, including internet searches. Do not form or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial until the case is finally submitted to you. See back at 3:10.
Please rise for the jury.
Anything we need to discuss?
Please rise for the jury. Please be seated.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your service. Is there any cross-examination?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Dr. Simmons, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you very much.
Good. My name's Joel Odou. I introduced myself right after you testified on direct. I represent Real Water. I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions. I think probably the best way to go is kind of reverse order, and I'll start where Ms. Mirkovich finished and go the other direction, just to shake things up and make it a little different for the jury. I'd like to start with, you were talking about Exhibit 430, if we could put that up. And Mr. Zamora will put it up for the jury. And I can either see it on my computer screen, but I can't see it up there without switching glasses. So the title of this article, Serial Evaluation of Children with ALF, et cetera, et cetera. This is the article that you relied upon in formulating your opinion. This is one of, the articles you relied upon in formulating your opinions, yes?
Yes.
And as part of your analysis of this article, did you determine what caused the ALF, the acute liver failure, in the children that were being studied in this article?
Yes, I did.
And what caused the children's ALF in this article?
I'd have to review quite a few, so I'd have to take a look at it. I think there were a variety of causes. I don't think there's one specific.
Okay. Do you, I don't want to waste a lot of the jury's time. I want to go quick if possible, but certainly we want to get it right too. Are you able to categorize the causes perhaps, or do we, because I found it in the other ones, I didn't find it in this one. It's not, so it's not a trick question.
Right. No,
I didn't find it.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I'm not able to, there were 11, it went down to 8 to 6, but I'm not able to group them, cluster them.
And that's fair. And we'll skip this article then, just in the interest of time. But were some of the causes viral hepatitis?
I can't confirm that, but that wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. So that was at least some of the causes, possibly.
Yeah, I can't confirm, but that wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. Let's go back to 426 then. Put that one up. And this is, you tell me what's the title.
That's the same one. I don't know if that's what you meant. Oh, no, it's the new, I'm sorry, it's the new one. Excuse me.
Okay.
Neuropsychological functioning and health-related quality of life.
Okay. And let's focus in down on the, Mr. Zamora, on the right-hand column, down right above the bait stamp that's 3057, which, of course, no, I'm not saying page numbers.
Right. Study of children's acute viral hepatitis.
Yeah, so at least some of the children in this study had viral hepatitis. Is that fair?
Yes.
And I know you're not a hepatologist, but in very, very broad terms, what is viral hepatitis?
Right.
To your knowledge.
Right, and again, right, I don't profess to be a liver specialist, but it would be a different mechanism to cause the acute liver failure, as opposed to drinking a substance or being exposed to a substance. It would be, a virally incited.
And hepatologists treat it. The children, regrettably, are in the hospital for lengthy periods of time.
Yeah, that's not my bailiwick of treatment of viral hepatitis.
No, I understand that. And in treating viral hepatitis, and I think you commented on the article we're going to see next. In fact, why don't we just go to that one? Let's go to 425. And the board glasses. Let's see what the title was. Is that 425? Okay, and this one, can you just read for the record the title of this article?
Of course, I took neurodevelopmental outcomes in children with liver disease as a systematic review.
Thank you, sir. And if we would look at the bottom of the page, it's page stamped, right column 3046, page 158 of the article, Mr. Zamora. I think there's a section, there we go, neurodevelopment outcomes of children with liver diseases who still have their native livers.
Yes.
You see that? And this again is children with viral hepatitis. Is that what it's talking about there?
I focused on, I was trying to be conservative and take out, there was 25 articles, and take out the 19 of kids who had liver transplant, because that wouldn't be fair to compare. So I was really focusing on the 6 articles, remaining 6, of kids who didn't undergo liver transplant. But so I don't know, I can't say how the 6 studies, how some must have had viral hepatitis, other had different reasons, right?
There's a number of things that can cause hepatitis, right?
Right.
I don't remember the official definition of so but basically, there's a number of things that can cause acute liver failure. We agree so far. Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was a question?
There's a number of things that can cause acute liver failure. We agree so far.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And you had said in the context of this article that some of these children are regrettably hospitalized for weeks and months at a time. Is that accurate for this article?
No, I don't think I was talking about them. I think we were talking, there's a different quote, just in general about the role of extensive hospitalization and procedures, what it can do to kids' neuropsychological functioning. And I was pulling from my experience of weeks and months would be in the pediatric oncology setting. I didn't read that. I was supporting the notion that extensive hospitalizations can impact one's development.
Okay. Well, that is the question, right? So if a child is hospitalized for weeks or months, you would agree that can impact their development or not?
Yes, at varying degrees of, yes.
And children that have a chronic illness, something that, with chronic viral hepatitis, they have to go out to the hospital, we'll just use frequently, I know that's an imprecise term, but for weeks or months at a time, they're not in school, they're in the hospital, you agree with me?
Yes.
You're nodding, I'm sorry.
No, yes, I'm sorry. That's exactly what I was referring to in my patient population of kids who experienced many hospitalizations and missed experiences that you're referring to.
Yeah, missed experiences in life, right? They're in the hospital, they're not in school, as an example.
That can happen, yes.
And they're not with their friends, they're in the hospital.
That's true.
And they're not, socializing, they're in the hospital.
Yes, to varying degrees, absolutely.
And we've seen that, in the case of the socializing, we've seen that somewhat with COVID, right? Because we have at least 2 years of children who missed out on high school graduations, college graduations, and all the other various social activities that
Yes.
children would have.
You're right.
And it's the same with smaller children, obviously, once you become school age, and because of COVID, kids missed out on certain development. You agree?
Yes.
And you would agree that that those missed opportunities definitely can impact a child's emotional well-being,
Yes.
and that the more missed opportunities, kind of the worse. Again, it's not a precise term, but you'd agree with that as a general proposition.
Then yes, there are increased risk if they miss
Okay.
formative experiences.
So in the case here, the jury has before it, Mr. Kemp provided us the number of days that each of the children was out of the hospital. And I may or may not get this right, so I'm sure that I'll be corrected if I don't get it right. But it looks like Larique and London, they were in the hospital a total of about 13 days. Does that sound about right?
That would be hard to average out from where I'm sitting, but if you've done the math, then I respect your work.
I was writing down the numbers as he was saying them, so I think I got them right. Harrow is about 12 days.
That sounds about right.
Wren was about 6 days.
I don't have that information at my fingertips, but I trust your calculation.
Okay, and I don't have a number for Severn, I didn't write quick enough, but we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to the individual children. So anyways, I'm looking at some of the studies that we're looking at. You would agree with me, there's a difference between a child who was in a hospital, and again, I'm not trying to minimize the traumatic event, being in a hospital. Let's start there. Being in a hospital is a traumatic event, we can all agree upon that, right? But there is a difference between being in a hospital for 2 weeks, 3 weeks versus something like 6 months or off and on for years. You would agree with me that there's a difference in that in a child's development.
Yeah, those are extreme examples, absolutely, yes.
And fortunately, in this case, the children, I think the longest hospitalization is about 13 days or so, give or take. Is that right?
I trust your calculation.
Okay. The last article that you talked, I'm sorry, the first article that you talked about was Exhibit 431, if you could bring that up, please. If you would just read into the record the title of that.
Of course. Association of liver fibrosis with cognitive test performance and brain imaging parameters in the UK biobank study.
All right, and if we could go to the second page under methods and design, there's an area under 2.1 on the left-hand side, design. Mr. Morris sees that. Now the question is, do I see it? There we go. So this was 500,000 participants between the ages of 40 and 49, or 40 and 69, is that right?
Yes.
The causes of fibrosis in these folks, was that provided?
I reviewed the article a few times. I'm not sure if it broke down. I wouldn't be surprised if it broke down the reasons for the fibrosis, but I was just focusing on fibrosis versus not, and then looking at the comparison of their performances.
Okay, and in adults, fibrosis can be caused by alcoholism, isn't that true?
Yes.
Were you able to read this article and make any distinction for adults who had fibrosis caused by alcoholism or anything related to the disease of alcoholism?
The article did not analyze the data that way. That would be an interesting concept, but it looked at those who had fibrosis, which was 10,000, versus the other balance that did not have fibrosis. They didn't do sub-analyses based on reason for fibrosis.
But you would agree with me that alcoholism is a disease.
Yes.
And there are definite both psychological impacts and neurological impacts for alcoholism. And regrettably, people with alcoholism, I don't know why I have trouble with that word, probably it's a horrible disease. People with alcoholism have other disabilities that go with it. And again, that's probably the wrong word. You probably have a better one.
Right. Yeah, there's other potentially complex variables.
It's a complex disease and it causes people to have difficulty learning, difficulty in their jobs, difficulty in their lives. Would you agree?
I'm not an expert on alcoholism, but you'd be surprised at how many people are successful and drink alcohol excessively.
I'm sure, but it still is it's a terrible disease and it does cause problems with people's lives.
Yeah, the worst case scenario.
So it really would be a fair comparison to compare the children that were injured in this case. Again, I'm not trying to minimize their injuries with somebody who's a family that was injured by alcoholism. Would you agree?
It's an interesting question that we can't answer, unfortunately, because they didn't analyze the data that way. But yeah, if one were able to look at the reasons for fibrosis, and there was an analysis that we could review, that would be informative. I think what we're going to wind up coming to an agreement on at the end of this is that the data is sparse, and that we're struggling to find articles that match this population, but everything I have looked at doesn't portend well for them, and they're at risk, is what I'm inferring. But you're right, this is not, if there are questions about how they got fibrosis, it's a legitimate point.
And thankfully, we don't have other children injured with hydrazine in studies, so thankfully we can't do an apples to apples comparison. You would agree with that?
Right, yes.
Yeah. And for the diagnosis of fibrosis, my understanding is you would typically rely on a pathologist.
Right.
And for the treatment of liver injuries, we rely on, in this case, Dr. Hudson will be testifying tomorrow. You're nodding, we got to have.
I don't know if he's I read his report, but I don't know the schedule of who's testifying tomorrow.
That's right. He's testifying tomorrow, but you would be relying upon Dr. Hudson for
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
for
Excuse me,
that
yes.
diagnosis. Okay. Let's talk about the individual kids in this case. And to do so, I want to talk a little bit about the work that you did in preparing your opinions. Obviously, you relied upon Dr. Hudson for his diagnosis, correct?
Yes,
And he reviewed the medical records primarily, but you also reviewed them for your information.
yes.
And as part of your review, and again, I don't know how to ask this, I'm not trying to get something, but you're not a medical doctor.
No, you're correct, 100%.
So you're reviewing for a different purpose, is that fair?
Yes,
And as part of your work, you reviewed the parents' depositions.
yes,
And today you were able to see Shantae Williams testify in person.
correct.
Were you able to review the trial testimony of Severin Morales' father?
No, I don't believe I did.
What about Hera Carrier? Were you able to review the trial testimony?
No, I don't believe I had.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about each of the children. Let's start with Christopher Noah Wren. My understanding from his mother's trial testimony is that Christopher Noah Wren has had, since the incident, various counseling with various autism specialists, again, for lack of a better word. Do you agree?
Yes.
Have you talked to any of them?
No, I did not.
Did you review their records?
Whatever was in the medical records, mostly pertaining to the hydrazine exposure.
Did you review any of the counseling records for Christopher Noah Wren?
No, I did not.
You did get to, I guess, see little Chris on the Zoom,
Yes,
and he was coming in and out of the Zoom, I guess, taking his dad's phone.
yes.
So at least you got to lay eyes on him, so to speak. Okay. And as part of your Zoom interview, we weren't there, the jury wasn't there, I wasn't there. The primary purpose of the interview is to talk to the father about how little Chris is doing. Is that fair?
Yes, all the parents, exactly, to qualitatively, not quantitatively in the questionnaire exclusively, but qualitatively, how life is going for these children.
Okay. And it looks like Chris is, 6 years old now?
That sounds all right. I may have just turned 6 recently.
Okay. And have you had an opportunity to find out if he's in, what would that be, kindergarten?
So the dad was at the time of the phone call, currently looking for a school placement. And when I saw him today, in my mind, I didn't know it was appropriate to speak to anyone, so I didn't say anything. But I was curious if he found a school, because in my nature, I'd like to help him with that process.
And are you familiar with the Clark County School District?
No, but I'm part of a network of psychologists across the country, and I reach out to colleagues.
I can tell you, as a parent of the Clark County School District, school selection is very important to a lot of the parents here. Have you've never heard that before? Or that, I mean, obviously that's kind of a general rule anyways, right? Again, you're nodding. I'm just trying to
Sorry,
make
so you're
it-
asking me if it's a selective process?
Yeah, is school important for a kid?
Yeah, of course, yes.
And the programs that school offers is important.
Yes.
And do you know what programs Clark County School District offers for children that have any types of developmental issues.
No, I do not.
Have you heard of I think it's an IEP?
Yes.
What is that?
So there's two ways to access services. An IEP is an individualized education plan. That's a legal document. The law protects the child and the parent.
Aaron, can I approach? Pause for a second, sure, come on in.
Let's take a step back. Dr. Sands, are you aware of what services Chris Noah Wren is presently getting?
His dad told me that he's currently receiving occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language therapy, and ABA, applied behavior analysis therapy.
And those are from his autism diagnosis?
No, the ABA is specific, recommended for autism, but those other three are not specific to autism.
They're beneficial all the way around? Is that what you're saying?
Beneficial for children who have fine motor, gross motor, and speech and language difficulties, of which Chris is presenting this.
So
And the
they're
ABA, and the ABA is specific for autism.
Okay, so the services that you're getting is beneficial to the child, that's all I'm getting at.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we agree. Let's talk about Hera Carrier. Do you know what grade she's in?
Yes, second grade.
And you know where she's going to school?
Not off the top of my head, I must have put her, I think I put her in my report, I usually do.
And are you aware that she's trying out sports?
Yes,
And what sports she's doing?
I want to say gymnastics, she liked dance, that is what comes to mind.
Softball.
Softball,
So she's doing softball. That's a good team sport for a child, you agree?
can be, sure,
Socialize them,
Yeah,
get them used to
yeah.
team sports.
yes.
You think that's beneficial for her?
Sounds like a nice opportunity.
And she's getting good grades?
Yes. Parents said that she was doing okay in school.
And she's now about, what, 8 years old?
It sounds about right.
You didn't interview her directly.
No, she wasn't home, I did not.
The counseling that you're recommending for Hera, is that something you personally do, or you're more of a resource to say, this is the type, and then she goes to see somebody else?
Exactly. I live and work in New York City, so I wasn't suggesting that I do any of this, but just as a professional with a lot of experience, saying that given the literature, given what she's been exposed to, she's at high risk, more probably than not, of needing services. So the assessments, I think you're asking about psychological, psychiatric specifically, is just an assessment, and then that person would then recommend or work with them. So it's not an absolute that she needs a therapist, but that she be screened to see if she would benefit from individual therapy.
That's
That I would not provide.
Thank you. I'm not sure we made that clear before, so I did want to get that very clear. Talking about the Williams twins, London and
Yes.
Louis. They're the ones who, I guess, are doing gymnastics and maybe soccer in the future?
Those, I mean, they're quite young, so that's something that Mohammed said should explore.
And as a parent of children with civil and rivalry, I've got to ask, is that, it sounds like they've got some, is that normal?
Yes, siblings get along and then sometimes don't get along, particularly twins.
Hopefully someday, not asking for myself, someday the children get along and they like each other.
Of course, yeah, no, it's a strong relationship that, like most siblings, get along, don't get along, depending on the time of day.
And they did some behavioral therapy with My Left Foot for a couple of months in 2021.
That's what Mom said, yes.
Did you talk to anybody at My Left Foot as to the therapy that the twins received?
No.
Let's see. Sever Morales was the other child that was injured. Did you get an opportunity to see him on the Zoom?
He wasn't home.
Oh, okay. Did you talk to his father?
Oh, and just going back to the two Williams, they were home, I did see them. We
You did see
chatted with them.
Okay.
But, yeah, Severin, yeah, spoke to Dad.
And do you remember his dad's name?
I don't want to make a mistake, so.
No, that's okay, Jorge.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
It's not a quiz. She talked to Jorge, sorry, one of my friends is named Jorge Gonzalez, and we walked right into that. Jorge Morales about him being a single father and raising seven.
A little bit, yes.
And it sounds like he's done a pretty good job, he did great.
Yes, he is doing the best he can, and it seems like he's a very caring, loving father, who's devoted.
All right, and in terms of the parents, let me see, actually, I'm gonna be too far ahead of myself. So now that the children are all school age, would it be beneficial to talk to their teachers?
So I was just thinking about where they are in school. But yes, it would be beneficial.
I think we have some preschoolers, you know, the Williams twins are preschool. I think Severin Morales just graduated from preschool. He wants to be a YouTuber and is very smart and likes pizza. Those are my notes. Do you know those things?
No, I didn't actually. Those are good things. I always look for strengths and things they enjoy doing. I was also, hearing dads talking about fine motor, gross motor difficulty, and difficulty paying attention and waiting his turn.
And his dad says he's very loving. That's a good thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
All right.
And we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses.
All right. Let's see, I think. So your conclusion for the children was basically to do, and I want to make sure we get this clear, to do an evaluation every 2 years until they reach the age of 21.
Yes.
And then the other part of that is if they did need services, or this is the part where I need some clarification. Is it if they did need services, it would be 2 times a week for 6 years?
Yes,
And that's only if they need, right?
correct.
Okay, so they evaluate them, they decide if they need the services, and then if they do, they get 2 times a week for 6 years.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, wanted to make sure I got that right. And then also there's a future psychological and psychiatric evaluation done yearly until they're age 21.
Yes.
And then if they need services, it's 1 week or 1 to 4 years.
Yes, at the discretion of the treating mental health professional.
And then lastly, for the parents, you just observed that, hey, this has been a horrible event for them and that they could benefit from some counseling. Is that fair?
Yeah, very fair.
Dr. Sands, I want to thank you again for your time today and for coming to testify in front of our jury. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, thank you very much.
Dr. Sands, Mr. Odou referenced a few, sounds like good things these children are doing. Harris playing softball, Severin Morales in pre-K wants to be a YouTuber, London and Lyric maybe doing gymnastics or soccer, Chris Wren is in some form of educational program. The fact that these children are doing these good things, does that mean your opinions are wrong?
Absolutely not.
Does it mean they're not at risk?
No, it means they are at risk because they ingested a neurotoxin and went to acute liver failure. And as we talked about, the multi-organ, the liver is connected to other parts of the body, including the brain. They were very young when this happened. We don't know enough about what to expect, so we're erring on the side of caution. And being in pre-K is, again, very different from being in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, graduate school. So as their brains develop, they may, it's this concept that I don't think I mentioned to you, growing into the deficit, meaning you don't have the deficit now, but you grow into it because your brain is not developing frontal lobes similar to other people, so you have executive functioning problems, or the tasks you're asked to do are beyond your capacity to read, understand what you're reading, right? So you grow into the deficits, meaning you don't have them now, but you can grow into them later on when your brain is supposed to be developing like healthy peers, and the tasks become more complex. And I'm not just talking academic, social, athletic, etc.
You got your sense, nothing further.
Let me read cross.
Dr. Sims, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming
My
today.
pleasure.
Any questions from you?
Any question?
Yes, I just gotta wait, you know.
No, I'm not going anywhere. Oh, thank you.
Okay, couple more. How important is environment with their development?
So, the word environment is very broad. I didn't know what you meant in terms of environment. Can I ask a clarifying question?
Not to the jurors,
Okay,
but,
so I can be broad. So environment is critically important, and we're only starting to include those variables in our studies. So factors like it's not just, yes, socioeconomic status is highly correlated with overall academic achievement. It's unfortunate it shouldn't be that way. But so how do you get at socioeconomic status is really difficult. Zip code is actually not as precise as we would like. Someone's income is not as precise as we'd like. Education of the parent is also not so precise, but that's what we've been using. And there's some new variables like, and again, I'm not here to educate, but a childhood opportunity index, COI, that actually puts in someone's address, and it's 0 to 100. Access to parks, libraries, athletic fields, quality of education, etc., income, immediate income. So that's a great question. Yes, it is important, and we are starting to research it in a more refined way. We've been limited to zip code, income, and education previously.
Similar question, how important is treatment with their development?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't.
How important is treatment with their development?
So I'm not sure if the question was meant to say if, so there's two ways. One would be how important is the medical treatment they received to their development, and the answer, if that were the question, would be that it's critically important. Again, if somebody has a treatment that a diagnosis and disease that impacts their brain, or treatment that affects their brain, that would be critically important. And then you start getting into how old were they, what type of treatment, how it would impact their brain, because there's different variations, period. If the question is meant to say, hey, you're talking about occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language, reading help, math help, how helpful is that for development? Does that actually work? The answer is yes. And it would be that graph that I showed where you want to identify problems early and close the gap of a half a year or 1 year behind, as opposed to a child who's in 4th grade and can't read, and what are you going to do? Repeat 4th grade and do the same exact thing that didn't work last time? Or push them to 5th grade and they're even further behind? And they're struggling and feel terrible about themselves. So yes, those interventions, if that's what you mean by treatment, are critically important early to identify problems, and then reevaluate and say, hey, you made a ton of progress in the last year or two. We can cut back from twice a week to once a week, or get rid of it because you actually are now have caught up. So if that's the treatment we're talking about, that would be the answer.
Any follow-up questions from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor.
Any follow-up questions from the defense?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Your Honor, may I accuse you to walk after session?
Your Honor, we call Blaine Jones by video, and I'm advised that it's 26 minutes long, so we, any lower read that.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
Yes. So, Mr. Jones, did you drink real wine?
I did.
Okay, could you take a look at exhibit 26, please? Tell me if you recognize that document.
I don't recognize the document specifically, but I recognize what it's, thank you, describing.
Okay. This appears to be a narrative that was put on a GoFundMe page. Okay. Did you put a narrative on a GoFundMe page?
I did.
Okay. Does this appear to be the narrative that you put on your GoFundMe page?
Appears to be, I can't recall specifically what I said, and if this is 100% accurate, but
Okay. Approximately when did you put the narrative on the GoFundMe page?
looks like it was 25th of October, 2020, has that date on the document there. Sounds about right.
Where are you looking? That page?
It says 501.
Okay. You're looking at Spanish on the bottom,
Yes,
where it says Fecha de Creation.
correct.
You speak Spanish, right?
Not fluent, but yes.
You know Fecha means date. Right.
Yeah.
So you're saying the day of creation of this is October 25th?
Yes.
Is that consistent with your memory that you did create this on October 25th?
Sounds about right.
Okay, back to the first page. Could you read the first full paragraph that starts with "My name is Blaine Jones"?
My name is Blaine Jones. The pain, confusion, and fear I have learned about acute liver failure and hepatitis over the last few weeks invokes the old phrase, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
Okay, and this says the last few weeks, and we've had the date of October 25th on the page. Does this refresh your recollection as to when you had this liver injury?
It was October of that year, yeah?
October 2020, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now there's some reference made in here to a hunting trip.
Correct.
And where were you going hunting?
Utah.
Can you be more specific?
Just outside of Carbon.
What were you hunting for?
Elk.
You got attacked?
I did.
And you were accompanied by someone?
I went up there alone, but I knew someone that lived in the area and I met him.
One of your friends, I see.
Acquaintance, I met him.
What was his name?
I don't specifically recall his name, to be honest with you right now. I had only met him one time prior to that, and I haven't spoken to him since.
Okay, but he had attacked it.
He did not know, he knew the area and he offered to show me around.
He was more of a guy person.
No, it wasn't the guy,
Oh,
acquaintance.
okay. All right, so does this, anyway, you drove to Utah from that?
Yes.
You remember if you left on Thursday, Friday, Saturday?
I think I left on like a Thursday, something like that, maybe a Wednesday.
Okay, if you want to take a look at the second page and maybe if you give a little context to it. 1, 2, 3, 4 down. Could you read that paragraph?
Which paragraph again, sir?
Where it says after the morning hike, and then we'll try to put this into some kind of context.
After the morning hike, I thought I had full-blown food poisoning.
Now, was this the first full day in Utah?
So that day, I had arrived the day prior
Okay.
and, set up camp and, different things.
Was that the day you went to KFC?
It was the, yes, I believe so.
So on the day you arrived, you went to KFC, right?
I believe so, yes.
And you said, quote, later that afternoon I began to feel sick, unquote.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so you actually started feeling sick the day that you got there.
Yes, I believe so.
Did you bring real water with you?
I did.
How much did you know?
I believe I brought a 5-gallon bottle.
So you were drinking it during the course of being out there?
Correct.
Did you bring anything else other than real water you drink?
I might have had some other Gatorade or some other kind of drink, probably.
Okay. Okay, so that's when you started getting sick that afternoon, right?
Correct.
And you said, quote, nausea came over me that night, unquote. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And in the morning, you had what you thought was, quote, food poisoning, unquote, right?
That's what it initially felt like, yes.
And having had food poisoning, you're throwing up a lot, and you're feeling nauseous and
Yeah.
weak, right? Okay, so then it says that afternoon I went to sleep, and this was Saturday, right?
That's what it says there, yeah, sounds all right.
So this was the Saturday after the Friday that you got there.
Correct. Believe so.
It says Sunday you slept all day, only to wake up at midnight feeling decimated after having thrown up and dehydrated.
Yeah, that's what it says.
Did you take that?
No, that's right.
Okay, and is that in fact what happened?
Yeah, that's what I can remember.
Had you ever felt this way before?
I can recall having, food poisoning where I felt similar to that. However, Sunday, it kind of progressively got worse. So it felt at that point in time like a very bad case of food poisoning, very severe case, I guess you could say, of food poisoning.
Okay, so it says you slept all day. Was that on site at the hunting area?
Yeah, I was in the tent.
You set up a tent?
Correct.
And was that just for you, or was the other guy sleeping up there too?
I had my tent by myself, and he had his own tent.
Okay. So it says, quote, I decided I needed to go to the hospital for attention, right?
Yep.
And did you go to the hospital for attention?
I did.
And what hospital would that be?
The local hospital there in around Carbon. I don't remember the name specifically off the top of my head.
Carbon spelled C-A-R-B-O-N?
Yes.
Okay, that whatever the local hospital was in Carbon you went to.
Correct.
Okay, so you went into the ER, they gave you some tests, and then fluids, and then they let you out, right?
Yep.
How long do you think you were in the ER at that point in time?
Maybe an hour or two.
Okay. So you drive back to camp and you say Monday you slept all day. Is that right?
That's what it says, yeah. Sounds right.
So you actually slept all day Sunday and all day Monday.
Besides the trip to the hospital, yeah,
Okay.
for the most part, I think.
It says you had no energy. I had no energy to get up, barely enough to choke down some water. Did I read that right?
That's what it says, yeah.
And so the water would be the real water?
Most likely, yes.
Okay. So during the time period you were sick, you were still drinking the real water?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Moving on. I dumped myself into my truck and he drove down the mountain to the pharmacy. Would that be your friend?
Yeah.
Okay, and so what day would this have been?
I don't recall specifically if it was Monday or Tuesday.
Okay, if you take a look back up the paragraph, after it says Monday you slept all day, it says, quote, the next morning I felt the necessity to get up.
Okay, yeah, so then I guess it would have been Tuesday.
Okay, so on Tuesday you drove down the mountain to the pharmacy, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you filled the prescription, you went to your friend's hospital, right?
Correct.
And you said, quote, what I would soon realize was I had a few levels to fall down before I hit the bottom of this nightmare.
Yep.
Right? And the nightmare would be the illness you're suffering, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the next paragraph says you got off the couch. Is that a couch at his house?
I believe so.
And again, we think this is Tuesday, right? you described going to the bathroom, and you think you went multiple times, and he says you went once, right?
Yes,
So you were delusional at this time?
yes,
So, you went outside, and it sounds like you're kind of stumbling down the street, is that what's going on?
I was out in front of his house.
Okay. So your mother called an ambulance?
Yes, I was trying to reach somebody that I knew, and she was the only one that answered the phone at the time.
Okay, so this would have been Tuesday night? Or Tuesday-
Afternoon,
Tuesday afternoon, okay.
maybe midday, I'm not sure.
And this house is in Mirkovich, right?
Yep.
All right. So the ambulance arrived and they put you in the back of the ambulance and they take you to the hospital, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And skipping over a paragraph, it says, quote, next time I remember being wheeled down the hall into a room with a doctor. Over the next few hours, I was getting IV fluids. Next, the doctor told me my liver was shutting down and the next few days would be very painful. Did I read that right?
Looks like it.
So this would have been on Tuesday?
Yes.
So Tuesday, a doctor told you that your liver was shutting down, correct?
I believe that was what the doctor said, yes, if I remember correctly. Again, I was pretty out of it, but as far as I can remember, yes.
Okay. And do you know what ALT and EST liver tests are?
I'm familiar, somewhat, very elementary understanding of it.
And do you know if they ran those on you at this time?
I don't recall or not, no.
Was there some other member of the family communicating with the hospital about your condition, other than, well, was there other than you?
I believe they got a hold of somebody, I don't know specifically who they were speaking to.
Okay, the next paragraph, or sentence says they notified your father, right?
Yeah,
Okay, and that would be Wren Jones, right?
correct.
Okay, and so he actually talked to you and said, I'm gonna come get you?
I don't remember if I talked to him or if the doctor relayed the message. I just remember somehow knowing that he was coming to pick me up.
Okay, well, it says, quote, he gave me two options, one stay in the hospital or two go to the hotel, right?
Yeah, I was referring to the doctor.
Oh, the doctor gave you two options, okay. So you went to the hotel,
Yes.
and the reason you went to the hotel is because you were worried about the medical bills since you had no insurance?
Yeah.
Would you have otherwise stayed in the hospital?
The way the doctor put it and giving me that option, he was basically saying it was, up to me what to do. At that point in time, like I said, I didn't have health insurance, so I made the decision to go to the hotel.
Okay, and you walked from the hospital to the hotel?
Yeah, it was just down the street, maybe 100 yards or so, 200 yards.
Okay, and you say, quote, I left the hospital on the hardest, less than a block walk I've ever experienced, unquote. Did I read that right?
Yeah.
Okay, you were stumbling and you fell on the ground over 15 times?
Sounds about right.
So 15 times in 100 yards?
Yeah.
Okay. You weren't in good shape, I take it.
I was not.
Mm-hmm. So, flip over to the next page. Had you already checked into that hotel, or did you have to check in the hotel?
I honestly don't remember or recall how I got the key or the reservation for the room.
You were out of it.
Very much so.
Okay. But you say here you flopped into the hotel, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then your wife convinces the hotel people to feed you some apple, right?
Yeah, they left some food and Advil, out from my room.
Okay. And then your dad comes up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
And in the next paragraph, it says, quote, the doctor warned me you were going to feel before you left the hospital?
When he gave you that warning,
Yeah.
that was when I was at the hospital, yes.
So you went back to the hospital after your father came?
No,
Okay.
not at that point,
So while you were at the hospital, he told you this?
yes.
Okay. And now it says this was Wednesday now, right? We're on Wednesday?
Yes, that's what it says, looks like it.
Okay. And so your dad drives you back to Vegas, I assume, right?
Yep.
Okay, so they set you up, kind of a little room here at your house, I take it, right?
Yeah.
And then you got a case of hiccups?
Yeah, I remember it started on the drive, home, and
It says you're forcing fluids down. Is that during drive?
where,
During the next 2.5 days, my time was filled with hiccups, forcing fluids down, and every time I tripped to the bathroom for fluids to come back up.
yeah, so that was, when I was at the house, and, like I said, the room, got set up in the bedroom.
And the fluids, you're still drinking the real water?
Probably, that would have been the water we had at the house, I don't remember, it's hard to convey the, difficulty of, being aware of what's going on, at that point in time.
That you started getting worse at home. That's what it says.
Yeah, over the next couple of days, I mean, as the doctor told me at the hospital that the next few days were gonna be very hard, and I definitely did continue to get worse.
Okay, you got worse than you were when you were in the hospital, when you were stumbling 15 times, walking 100 yards to the hotel?
Yeah.
You were worse than that even?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I was throwing up blood and not able to hold anything down,
And the throwing of blood, that's the reference to the red-brown mix of fluid exiting my mouth?
Yep.
It says your grandmother had come from 5 hours away to aid in my care.
Yeah, she came to help.
Where does she live at?
She lives in California.
Just after midnight on Friday, her voice uttered what I needed, hospital.
Yep.
So she told you to go back to the hospital?
Yes.
And so Friday, we're a week after, this is the Friday after you went to Utah on Friday.
Correct.
So this was 8 day in a row you've been sick?
Friday to Friday would be 7 days.
Okay.
8 days,
All right.
something like that, yeah.
Okay. And then to the car, you're going your third trip to the hospital.
Okay.
So that's 2 trips to Utah Hospital, third trip to hospital here in Vegas, I assume, right?
Correct.
Okay. And what hospital was that?
I don't recall the name of it off the top of my head, it's the one here up in, it's, north of the 215 over off of Buffalo, somewhere in that area over there.
North of 215 by Buffalo.
Yeah, I can't remember, Springs Mountain maybe is the name of it. I can't
Okay.
recall specifically.
Have you been to the hospital before?
To that hospital?
Yeah.
No, I didn't do that one.
Okay. So anyway, they checked you in the hospital, right?
Yep.
And you say, I was diagnosed as critical and rushed into the ICU, or the intensive care unit.
Yep.
So they checked you into intensive care.
Yep.
We're in the middle of COVID right now, aren't we? COVID-19.
It was ramping down, but, I mean, it depends on what your definition of the middle of COVID is, I guess.
They had COVID restrictions at the hospital still.
Yeah, I mean, they still have COVID restrictions in the hospital right now.
Okay. So this weekend, I stayed under constant supervision, blood tests every 4 hours, and something continuously being injected into one of my 2 IV connections. Did I read that right?
Looks like it is.
So that weekend would be the Saturday and Sunday after you checked into the Vegas hospital, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Now, next sentence says, quote, "The doctors don't know why I got sick," unquote.
Yep.
Did the doctors tell you they didn't know why you got sick?
They did.
And I assume they asked you if you did alcohol, right?
Yeah, they had a number of different questions,
And do you use alcohol?
occasionally.
Okay, so they ruled out alcohol, right? Or you ruled out alcohol?
I mean, I, from my understanding of, cirrhosis and liver failure, I'm not drinking enough in my life to get to that point.
Okay.
I'm not a medical expert, obviously, but
You're an occasional drinker,
yeah,
like 1 or 2 drinks a week, maybe?
at the most.
Okay, and it says, what they didn't know was if I had gotten worse, the only option was a liver transplant, unquote. Did I read that right?
Yes.
And did they discuss a liver transplant with you?
Yeah, a specialist came in and, he said that, there was a short amount of time where he was debating whether or not to send me to California for a liver transplant.
Did they tell you what hospital in California they were considering?
No, I don't recall.
Okay, remember if it was perhaps Loma Linda, USC, UCLA? Okay, what was the specialist name, do you remember?
I don't.
And you said he came in, he was not at a hospital, he came from another hospital?
The way he made it sound is he kind of circulated around hospitals because his specialty was something in regards to liver or something,
Okay. And it says, quote, "My tests for liver failure were teetering at this point in no return," unquote. Did I read that right?
Yeah.
And those would be ALT, AST tests?
They weren't reviewing tests with me at that point in time specifically. I just recall a conversation with that doctor. He basically, and this was shortly after I began to, not get worse.
Now it says, "My tests for liver failure were teetering at this point in no return." Do you remember if they were talking about your ALT or AST being in the thousands? Does that ring any bells?
I don't recall specifically what tests. I mean, other than generically referring to tests at that point in time. I mean, I'm still in the ICU and very, don't have all my faculties, I guess would be the way to put it.
Okay, the next paragraph says, "By Monday, I was relocated to general level hospital, stable enough to be transferred." Did I read that right?
Yep.
So that means on Monday, you're moved from ICU to general section hospital?
Correct.
So you've been in the hospital, you checked in Friday night, right?
Yeah.
So you've been there Saturday, Sunday, and on Monday, they moved you out of ICU.
I believe that sounds right.
Okay, and would I be correct if they did not let you bring real water into the hospital?
I don't recall bringing anything other than myself to the hospital.
Okay, so the only liquid you bring to the hospital was hospital water.
I wasn't able to drink any liquid in the hospital for a good amount of time.
You didn't drink any liquids?
When I was in the ICU, I wasn't able to really drink or eat much of anything. And then I think just before they transferred me out, I had some liquid food. I was able to keep that down, and then when I was in the general sort of recovery area, was when I was actually able to, drink some water and get some food from the cafeteria or they would deliver food to your room.
Okay, when you drink the water, that was hospital water, not real water.
It was the water they provided, yes.
Okay. And it says, I skipped something, it says that you have blood tests every 4 hours during the weekend. See that in the top there?
Yeah, there was a nurse that would come in when I was in the ICU every 4 hours to take a sample and run tests.
And you know if those are the liver tests that we're talking about?
I don't know what they were.
Okay, the next paragraph says, Tuesday morning, you want to be discharged. So you went home Tuesday morning?
Late morning, midday, somewhere around there, yeah.
It took me a week and a half of hell to achieve my regime of rest at home. Unquote. Did I read that right? Regimen, okay. So Tuesday morning you went home, right?
Yep.
And how long did you stay at home before you were able to go back to work?
I want to say it was about a week and a half.
Okay. So since we've got about a week and a half to Tuesday morning, you were
granted, I mean, I was still extremely weak and out of it even at that point in time, after that point in time.
Okay, and it says, the next sentence it says, the debilitation of liver failure, I have been to hell and back. Did I read that right?
Yeah, it was a very terrible experience.
Okay. You wouldn't go through this again if I gave you $10 would you?
Yeah.
That's it, John.
Continue break for the day. So ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow we'll come back at 10 a.m. So 10 a.m., not 11, 10 a.m. tomorrow. During this recess, you're admonished not to talk and converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this trial. Do not read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial or any person connected with the trial by any medium of information, including without limitation to social media, text, newspapers, television, internet, radio. Do not visit the scene of any events mentioned during the trial. Do not undertake an investigation. Do not deal in close communications on any social networking sites. Do not do any independent research, including internet searches. Do not form or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial. Until the case finally submitted to you, we'll see you back tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Please rise for the jury.
Quickly, so tomorrow, who do we have?
Tomorrow we have Dr. Hudson, Your Honor, and we have Mr. Perry, and we have Mr. Dessa, one. So wherever we're at, we're glad to him. He's probably.
Okay, and then please will rest.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then Monday, we'll start up with the defendant's case.
Yes, do we have no time on that?
11, I believe. Let me double check. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think probably 11, except for we get as far as next Thursday, 11 Monday through Wednesday.
We'll hope we can get the defense case done in 2 days, and then do the closing on Wednesday.
Yeah, we're talking, we've got some scheduling issues that we're gonna talk to Mr. Kemp about.
Okay. What was I gonna say? So over the weekend, if you all could, go over, are there any jury instruction issues? Because we'll have to start talking about those next week. Verdict form, that stuff again, just double check. Let's see, anything else?
We'll try and get today's stipulation produced for
yeah.
writing rather quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Tomorrow's fine, Monday's fine. Anything else from police?
No, Your Honor.
No, you're.
All right, see you tomorrow. 10 a.m.
Thank you.